All right, let's talk about the history of America. It's a story that's incredibly powerful, but let's be honest, on the entertainment scale, kind of a snooze fest. So forget what you've seen in the movies. No epic sword fights, no kings. We're going to dive into how a nation literally built on paperwork and taxes somehow became a global superpower. Yeah, you heard that right. Paperwork.
So if you're one of those people who thinks history is basically a cure for insomnia, but you've got an exam coming up, then you are in exactly the right place. We're going to skip all the boring fluff and get right to the stuff you actually need to know.
So what's the deal with American history? Why is it so different? Well, for starters, you can forget all those epic royal dramas and big, flashy cavalry charges you see in other histories. Nope, the foundation here is way more mundane. It's really just a story about some English settlers, a ton of taxes, and, you guessed it, a whole lot of paperwork.
Okay, so to really get America, you've got to throw out any idea that it started as some grand nation with a noble destiny. It didn't. Not even close. It was a business venture, plain and simple. For England, America was basically just a giant rental property.
And the whole relationship? It was brutally simple. England looked at the map and saw dollar signs. That's it. The deal was super straightforward. Settlers from Europe come over, they work the land, England makes all the rules, and, this is the most important part, England collects all the money, all of it.
So this is where the trouble really starts. You've got England back in Europe, and they're constantly fighting these super expensive wars. And wars, as you know, cost an absolute fortune. They were broke. They needed cash, and they needed it fast. So, what was their brilliant solution? I think you can probably guess where this is going.
They decided to just tax the American colonies for everything. I mean, literally everything. You want to sit down and have a nice cup of tea? Boom, there's a tax for that.
You need to write a letter or, print a newspaper? Yep, got to pay a tax on the paper.
Trying to run a business, just make a living? Oh, you better believe there's a tax for that.
Even official documents needed a special stamp, which of course you had to pay a tax for. It was just relentless.
And this all boils down to one simple, infuriating question that the colonists started asking. It was like, wait a minute, we're paying all these taxes to a government where we have 0 representatives, no voice, no vote, nothing? And when they brought this up with England, the answer was basically, yeah, that's the deal, now pay up. And that simple injustice, that was the spark that lit the whole fuse.
So with all this tension, you just knew a breakup was coming. But listen, this wasn't some dramatic, glorious war. At least not at the beginning. Think of it more like a really, really long, drawn-out, administrative separation.
Let's take the Boston Tea Party, for example. We all know the story, right? It's 1773, and England slaps yet another tax on tea. So what do the colonists do? They get dressed up, sneak onto some ships, and just dump all the tea into the harbor. We remember it as this huge act of defiance, which it was. But let's be real here. It was basically a protest party with no music, no dancing, just a whole lot of perfectly good, wasted tea.
And that contrast really gets to the heart of the whole American Revolution. In our heads, we picture these epic Hollywood-style battles. The reality? Way less cinematic. Honestly, more time was spent in stuffy rooms having meetings and writing angry letters than was actually spent on the battlefield. This was a war won just as much by bureaucrats as it was by soldiers.
And what was the grand result of all those meetings and all that paperwork? The Declaration of Independence. And if you really boil it down, it's basically the world's most formal, over-the-top breakup letter. It's this long, super detailed document that pretty much just says, hey, England, it's not us, it's you. We're done.
Okay, so they did it. They got their freedom. Awesome. But that victory immediately led to the next giant and, frankly, massively boring problem. Now what? I mean, how do you actually build and run a country completely from scratch?
Well, their solution was to write a constitution. And let's be totally honest with each other. It might just be the sleep-inducing champion of all historical documents. It is not a page-turner. But for America, it is without a doubt the single most important rulebook ever written.
But hidden inside this super boring document are some of the most powerful and revolutionary ideas in modern history. I'm talking about the big ones. The idea that everyone is equal, that you have the freedom to say what you think and the freedom to believe or not believe in whatever you want.
And then there was this one. The right to keep and bear arms.
This was a line born from a deep-seated fear of the government having too much power, and wow, it has remained one of the most debated and one of the most defining features of the entire country ever since.
But that rulebook had a huge, fatal flaw. It couldn't solve the single biggest contradiction at the heart of the country. How can you be a nation founded on freedom while still allowing slavery? You can't. And that tension exploded into the Civil War. It was a brutal, bloody conflict between the industrial North and the farming-based South. After 4 absolutely devastating years, the country was put back together and slavery was finally abolished. But the struggle to actually live up to that promise of equality, that was far from over.
So after basically tearing itself apart and stitching itself back together, America spent the next few decades just focused on itself, kind of licking its wounds and building up. But then the 20th century hit, and everything changed. America decided it was time to stop being a homebody and start playing on the world stage. And this transformation happened ridiculously fast. I mean, think about it. America kind of dipped its toes in the water during World War I. Then, for World War II, it did a full-on cannonball. By the time that war ended in 1945, America was, without question, the top dog, the undisputed economic and military leader of the world. And that new status led directly into the Cold War, this decades-long staring contest with the Soviet Union that was all about tension and technology, not so much direct fight. And this is where America really leaned into its new role, the self-appointed world police. The new foreign policy pretty much became, hey, if there's a problem anywhere on the planet, we'll be there. Now, sometimes that was to defend democracy, other times it was for its own interest. The rest of the world didn't always love this new arrangement, but it didn't really matter. America was firmly in the driver's seat.
All right, so let's bring this all home. The story of America, when you get right down to it, isn't one of high drama or grand passion. It's a history of meetings, of planning, of rules, and the slow, steady, almost unemotional accumulation of power. Yeah, it's kind of boring, but that might just be its secret weapon. And that's really the big question I want to leave you with. Did America become this massive superpower, not in spite of its boring history, but actually because of it? Something to think about. Hey, if you made it all the way through this, congratulations! You are officially a history survivor. Thanks for tuning in.